Commitment alert for Clemson here on Thursday, June 17th. Clemson brought in 2 4-star safeties for last weekend's elite retreat. First one is in the bag. Chesapeake, Virginia, 4-star Sherrod Koval has announced his commitment to the Tigers. For more on that and plenty of other analysis on Clemson recruiting, go to TigerIllustrated.com, where you can find the splendid recruiting coverage and insight from Paul Strelo, who does it better than anybody else. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. Solero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Solero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Solero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Solero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Solero at solerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Okay, to our conversation with Joe Person, longtime Carolina Panthers beat writer. Also before that, longtime South Carolina Gamecocks beat writer. This is a lot of fun, a lot of industry type stuff, sort of inside baseball, so to speak, which refreshingly a lot of you folks out there enjoy listening to. Here we go. All right, joined by my friend Joe Person. Man, we go back a long way, and you have always been one of the I've always thought of you as one of the best in the business. I know other people believe that too. One of the great sports reporters out there. How you doing, man?
I am doing well, man. We don't get to see each other as much as we used to, but I appreciate you having me on, and those were way too kind words that you were speaking, friend.
No. So all right. So you're with The Athletic now, covering the Panthers. Previously with the Charlotte Observer. How long were you with the Observer covering the Panthers?
I think I did 10 seasons. I had the poor timing to start in 2010, which for your listeners, your Panther listeners will remember, was John Fox's last year. It was Jimmy Clausen. It was 2-14. But it did put him in position to draft Cam Newton overall, which kind of turned the tide and led to really the best 3-year stretch in their history with Ron Rivera and Cam Newton and Luke Kuechly and that whole crowd. But now, you know, they're kind of starting over again with a new coach and Sam Darnold. And yeah, I've been on the beat a long time. I'm sure about the same length. You may have been at Clemson longer than I've been on the Panthers beat.
Yeah, since 2004. It's crazy to
the years go by, buddy.
Oh man, well, I mean, some of the more interesting part of your career as it relates to, I guess, Clemson-centric listeners is you spent a lot of time in Columbia working for the state, covering mainly Lou Holtz, but also Steve Spurrier, right?
I did. That was kind of cool to catch the end of the Lou Holtz era. I think the last 3-4 years, I think. And then the first maybe 4 or 5 years of Spurrier. So I think I was on the beat about 8 or 9 years. So Yeah, it was. Those are two totally different guys, obviously, two different dudes. But enjoyed my time very much in Columbia. A couple of my kids were born there. Still have a lot of friends there. Obviously, covered that awful day at Clemson where the two teams fought. That was, I guess, ended up being Lou Holtz's final game, and that was not a real fun day, I think, for anybody involved, even those of us, who were covering it.
Yeah, I guess staying on that brawl thing, just sort of related to, you're a reporter, you're covering something, you're expecting one thing to happen, you're expecting to write about the game and the stakes and Lou Holtz's last game, all that stuff. There were plenty of storylines going around that day before the brawl happened. I think one of the hardest things that you have to do as a news reporter, sports reporter, whatever, is immediately pivot when a story becomes something totally different from what you expected and when that story is huge. Is that difficult for you to transition like in the middle of that? And then how do you react to something like that that's totally unexpected?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it was difficult that day because I remember showing up to Death Valley like really sick.
Oh no.
It was one of those days where I probably shouldn't have been breathing my germs all over the rest of y'all in the press box, but I was like sucking down cold medicine and trying to fight through it. And you're right. It's like, all right, let me just write this about Lou's last game and, try to do the best I can on it. And then just all hell breaks loose. And, Steve Wiseman was there with me covering the game. I know Steve. And so he was great to have there as we kind of tried to make sense of the chaos and, go talk to as many people as we could. You'll remember, I think this is what you were referencing too, is like the news had broke. South Carolina folks were trying to keep it quiet that, they had already gotten this deal with Spurrier and Holtz was on his way out. And I do feel like that led on the Gamecocks sidelines to a lot of weird feelings among the players and maybe not a lot of accountability with a lame duck coaching staff. It was just, like I said, it was a weird day. I mean, I know people like to talk about watching the fights in hockey or the wrecks at a NASCAR race, but I'll be honest. I remember, not to sound like some, like holier than thou dude, but I remember watching it and kind of getting a sick feeling in my stomach and just like, my goodness, this is really happening. I'm sure my story did not do a very good job reflecting all those kind of emotions that so many people felt watching that. But I do remember trying to at least encapsulate some of that.
Yeah, I remember. So I was the Clemson beat writer for the Post and Courier at that point, and I remember the mistake that I made was not having the appropriate sense of how big it was in the moment. And so I remember, like, Ken Berger had already, as he was prone to do it during those days, I think he'd already written his column and maybe even gone home. Actually, I was standing with him on the sideline as Yusef Kelly threw the Gamecock helmet above us into the student section. But I want to say that Gene Sapikoff was writing about the brawl. I think Ken Berger was going to write about it some. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I didn't have to write about it as much as the beat guy. And I remember going back and reading my story the next day compared to everybody else's sort of game stories the next day and going, wow, I goofed. I did not write enough about the brawl.
It was tough. It was tough to know how much, I do think that it took on a life of its own. And, and unfortunately for the Gamecocks, there was more bad stuff to follow. where they, kind of the seniors or some of the guys, when they found out they weren't going to the bowl game, and they pulled down their photos off the wall at the football stadium. It was a bad time. It was, you just felt like, obviously they had already made the decision to move on from Lou and bring in Spurrier, but clearly change was needed at that time. And Spurrier did for a while, had it going on, and did bring a fresh voice and a new look, and, all that to the rivalry.
One of the things, I think the benefits of covering one team and one school for a long time is that it gets easier as time goes on, simply because you meet more and more people, develop more relationships, have more of an institutional knowledge of the team and the school, or I guess the franchise in your case that you're covering. When I think about starting from scratch, like, not that I'm entertaining the thought, I'm just saying, if I think of that as a possibility, like, say, going to Athens and trying to start from scratch covering Georgia, I'm terrified. You have had to do that quite a bit over the years on very high profile beats. I guess you moved from the Macon Telegraph to the State as the main Gamecocks guy. And then when a new coach comes in, such as Spurrier, you have to sort of start from scratch there, and then continue that to your move to the Charlotte Observer, doing a whole new sport basically. How do you do that? And is it intimidating, or is it more of something that's like you viewed as a challenge and enjoy it?
Yeah, a little bit of both, really. I feel like in most of those moves, and each of those moves I made, I was ready for a new challenge. I was ready to do something different. I used to feel like there was a shelf life on some of these beats. And I don't know that was the right way of thinking about it, because if you stay on them long enough, like you and I have, you do have change. It's not like you're covering the same administration or the same football coaches. And just the move that I made that was probably the most nerve-wracking, or made me the most anxious, I should say, was coming here to Charlotte, because I'd been pretty much mostly a college writer. As you said, I was in Georgia covering Georgia Tech. Even before that, right out of school, I did some Marshall up in Huntington, West Virginia, some Marshall coverage. I did some pros in Atlanta, like when the Falcons went to the Super Bowl in '98, but mostly my focus there was Tech. So Tech, and then the Gamecocks, and then all of a sudden, again, I was ready to do something different, but it was like, man, I've got all these college contacts. Are any of them going to transfer over? I mean, am I going to be able to lean on all these sources who I've developed? And the answer was a little bit. I mean, but mostly we just go and you do like we've always done, and it's try to let people know that they can trust us to tell their stories in a fair and a professional manner. And in doing so, it doesn't happen overnight, but you start growing that source list back up at the NFL level. And and then it all, so much of it does, I mean, this, but it does feel like a small world in a lot of these athletic circles. Like, I covered Shane Beamer as a GA at Georgia Tech. I covered him as a assistant at South Carolina. And then I was calling him a few months ago because after he got the job with the Gamecocks, he's hired a Panthers assistant Saturday to be his offensive coordinator. Yep. So and I still had Shane Beamer's number in my phone for however many years ago when I'd see him, buying groceries in Atlanta. So I like that part of it a lot. I know you do as well. You do a fantastic job making those interpersonal connections and then writing about a lot of those with the people that trust you to tell their stories.
So I know what you mean when you talk about developing a network of sources, but for the layman, for the average fan or person listening, can you put it into the layman's terms? Like what does that mean when you're starting from scratch and trying to build that?
Well, different things on different beats. In the NFL, I mean, in colleges, you're working you're getting to know a lot of the family members and the high school coaches and the high school offensive coordinators. And then, and that's still important at the NFL level, but not as much as getting to know the agents for all of these players who have a financial interest in seeing that their players, get a fair shake with the local reporters. Doesn't mean it's all fluffy and breezy and rainbows, but it does mean, yeah, I trust this guy. He tells it like it is. If my guy played terribly against the Jets on Sunday, he writes that, but he's not looking to take pot shots. And so the agents, that was, and that was what I meant too, like going to the NFL. We all on the college beats would see agents and talk to agents, around pro days and the draft, but not to the extent that you do on these NFL beats. And so, and you find just like anything else in life, right? That some of them you connect with and they're great and they call you back every time you leave a message. And then some of them aren't real nice people and they're not people you'd really associate with and they never return your call. So you hope that you build up enough of those in the former category. And, I tell people it's just, it's really like building sources is like building a friendship network somewhat. Mm-hmm. And it's just, being yourself, being sincere and showing them that they can trust you with information or to tell their clients or their sons or their high school players stories.
And maybe also not calling them only when you need something.
It's a great point. That's absolute. And I think I have found myself doing that sometimes with certain, and I feel terrible doing it. I mean, it's like, this is a guy I haven't reached out to for a while. So that's a great point that, there was I'll try to make a point to reach out when the Panthers just drafted a huge draft class, 11 players. And then they signed like 4 or 5 undrafted guys. And I made a point to reach out to all of those agents of the new players. And some of them I knew, a lot of them I knew, but there were probably a handful of them that I'd had very little, if any, dealings with. And I just introduced it. It's easy now, like with texting, like it's not like, you're playing phone tag. I mean, most of them would rather not be, I think they prefer the texting until they get to know you. And it's just like, hey, congrats. I see your guys here in Charlotte. This is who I am. I've been covering the beat for 11 years. If I can do anything to help you, hit me up. Look forward to, tell me. And then a lot of times they'll say, oh, you're going to love this guy. Did you know about, I'm not sure you know this about his background, but he went through this, or he is related to this person. And it's pretty easy stuff to do, but you're right. Sometimes, in kind of beat dynamics or beat maintenance, I guess you might call it. We get busy and it's like, man, I got to call this guy for this bad thing. And I hadn't called him in 2 years for anything good that his client or player did.
So I guess one distinction between college and the pros as far as how we do our jobs is in college, at least now, the barrier to sort of developing relationships with players and sort of getting to know them beyond just formal press conference settings, the barrier there is imposed by the head coaches usually who are really about control of the message, and so there are all these restrictions in place, whereas in the pros, fewer restrictions from the head coach or the organization, and the barrier is more the agents to sort of getting to know the players personally. Is that accurate?
Yeah, to an extent. Unfortunately, we've all had these barriers for the last year and a half,
Yep.
right? And that was a big concern for all of us, no matter what you cover. But at the NFL level, the union was really kind of using media access as part of their kind of holding it over the head of the league as they were trying to agree on these protocols. But just came out this week that it looks like we're starting to return to some kind of normalcy in terms of training camp access. I think we're in the locker rooms now during the week, but not after games on Sunday. I don't really understand that distinction. That's probably a whole nother conversation. But yeah, there's terrific access in terms of they're required to have, in normal times, these open locker room periods. And baseball and the NBA, all these, the pro sports pretty much do it pre-COVID, universally. And that's a great, obviously there's a huge crowd around Christian McCaffrey the day he talks. But the day, maybe 2 days later on a Friday, you're in there and you approach Christian, and I don't even have my tape record. I'm not even looking to interview him. I'm just like, hey man, how's it going at your new house? Or, just being a real person with them. Or, I don't want these guys that every time they see me, it's like they got to I'm putting on my reporter hat and they have to get into question answering mode. And some guys are cool with that, enjoy it. And, you don't get to know all 53 guys in the locker room, obviously, but I think a lot of them do want to know you on a more personal level. And I remember texting a couple weeks ago, or maybe just last week, about kind of some of the contradictions in keeping all of these vaccinated reporters out of the locker room while they were coming up with this new protocol. And I heard from a player, and he said, hey, keep pounding that drum, keep banging that drum. He's like, there's no reason why you guys shouldn't be in there. And so, some days you go in there and if they lost the day before, they don't want to be, they don't want to show up at their locker and have to revisit their drop pass on 4th and 7. So, there are days you sort of stand in there for 45 minutes and maybe two players come through, but other days are a lot more productive and, a lot of fun, just kind of cutting it up and, getting to know these guys a little better.
So no restrictions on, like you just mentioned, texting with a player, having a relationship with a player offline, sort of away from the official settings. Like in college, it'd be a red alert if if a coach found out a reporter were texting with a player casually. Is that so? Y'all are free to. The players are free to have whatever relationships they want to with the media.
Absolutely, but having said that, there is no doubt in my mind, because I've seen kind of how the sausage is made, that these PR staffs do not encourage that. In fact, I think they discourage that. And then it's just sort of up to these players who are now not 17 or 18, but 24 or 25 or 26 years old, whether they want to have somebody telling them what to do, when hopefully they're like, yeah, I know Joe or I know Larry and I like them and I trust them and I want them to come to my charity event when I have it next April. And so I think it would be good for me to have a relationship and not, do what PR is telling me and to shut them down.
Yeah, and I'm a grown man.
Exactly. And that's been nice. I mean, that was one of the challenges. There's a give and take in everything, right? Like there's no comparing the game day atmospheres of walking up to Death Valley or Williams-Brice or Sanford Stadium, and you name it, versus, walking up to, with the exception maybe of the Superdome. Like New Orleans feels about as close to like a college so like there's a trade-off. Like the game day atmosphere isn't as much fun when I'm walking into the stadium, even in a place like Kansas City. But I do like the fact that it's not the sports information director saying, here are the three people, the three players we're going to have available on Tuesday this week, before the Virginia Tech game, and only these three. So the other thing that gets to be a challenge now is a lot of these teams, including the Panthers, have really they've hired really talented digital media people. They've hired, folks like yourself and like me to work for the team websites, and they want their content to be pretty special, and so they'll get kind of first crack, and in some cases the only crack at some of these stories with like behind the scenes access of the draft, for instance, which the Panthers.com did a great job, but kind of stinks for folks like us that I didn't get the chance to do that same story, which I think would have been a wonderful opportunity.
Okay, so how do you, when the team itself, its official Oregon, is using its access to get stuff before the independent outlets, obviously, you don't like that. How hard is it to navigate through that to maybe challenge them a little bit, say, hey, why, how come we couldn't get that? Like how I guess delicate is that? And how do you resolve it sort of with within yourself in terms of just saying, hey, it's just the way things are now. I can still do my job well, even if the team I'm covering is sort of in essence competing with me.
Yeah. Another great question, buddy. I have in some cases resigned myself to certain stories that, for instance, they trade for Sam Darnold. Huge story. The news breaks. You're calling Darnold's agent. You're calling Darnold's family, calling the Panthers, and they're like, "Yeah, I mean, Darnold's not talking today, and we're looking to do a Zoom with him, in a few days when he comes in for his physical." Well, I know what's coming next. Is the day he shows up for his physical, he leaves the doctor's office, and they, after he shakes hands with David Tepper, one of the stops is with the team's media folks. And so I had to kind of finally come to the realization, not every team does that. I mean, a lot of them do, but some of them will just say, you know what, we're putting him on a Zoom, or, we're putting him in front of the podium, and our folks will get them when external media gets them. But more and more, certainly the Panthers, and I think the trend around the league is they want this unique content. The NFL one, these are sites, the league likes that. The league likes to direct people to NFL.com. And so I've just sort of said, I've got to do my story different. I've got to do it better. I've got to ask questions that maybe the internal team media won't ask. Like they had drafted a couple guys this year that had some character stuff or some suspensions or investigations like that. There's still some things that the in-house folks are not going to ask. And so not to say you're out, you got to go look for all the negative stuff. That's not what I mean. But so whatever you're going to do, you got to try to do it differently and better. And that's not always an easy task.
Yeah, like Clemson, their digital communications folks with football, they were some of the pioneers with a lot of this stuff years ago. And at the time you're like, okay, well, are they trying to like compete with us? And there were some other media members are speculating, this is the part of an overall plan by the athletics director to bury the media, this and that. Well, but really what it was in hindsight is they're just trying to do something cool. And yes, they're trying to monetize their sort of proprietary access. And the bottom line is, there's no Clemson fan that is only going to follow the ClemsonTigers.com for information. Most fans are still going to want that independent, authoritative coverage. And it's the same thing probably with the Panthers as well, as most fans, it's kind of like a grab bag of a democracy of different outlets, to where if you're doing a good job, you can still distinguish yourself, regardless of how frustrating it is maybe sometimes that the access isn't there to some high profile players like Darnold.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I'm the same way, like kind of with I grew up in Pennsylvania. Was never a huge like NFL, like Eagles type guy, but we were big. My family were big Phillies fans. So I'll still read a lot of the Philadelphia coverage, and I read a lot of it, and including the Phillies.com site, who, like a lot of these sites, they went and hired a terrific reporter probably 10 to 12 years ago from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And, yes, there are certain stories that he can't do, but for the most part, you don't even like think about, him. Just like you said, Larry, you're looking for a wide swath of good coverage, and you start to say, well, I know this guy is really good on analytical and trends. Like, in fact, our Phillies guy is who I'm thinking of. He's terrific on looking at big picture trends. And maybe I like this other writer's, feature stories or human interest stories. So, yeah, hopefully there's enough to go around, because I want to keep doing this for a while, buddy.
Yeah. What was so Cam Newton gets there. He is a mega star already, and probably has good reason to be cynical of the media, based on a lot of the storylines that surrounded his college days. How difficult was it to sort of get beneath the surface with him, if you were able to get beneath the surface and develop a relationship with him?
He was tough. I mean, it was for all the reasons you just mentioned. Like, they had been through the media wash and listen, of their own making, of Cecil Newton's own making. And yeah, they had even like Peter King, where Cam had said, I want to be an entertainer, an icon, and an athlete. Like, all of it. Like, they had a very jaded, his team, so to speak, had a very jaded view of the media. But I'm at the paper of record in Charlotte. I think that still carried some weight, certainly at the time, and hopefully still today. And I remember they draft him and the lockout's going on. And I was reaching out to everybody associated with his team that I could think of. And that's marketing people. That's his dad. And somehow or another, I don't remember what the connection was. I think on the marketing side, they were like, listen, Cam is going to be down at IMG training for a couple weeks during this lockout. It's, he's going to be working with Chris Wenke, actually. And and they said, you can come down. I mean, I think ESPN's going to do something, but we're not throwing this open for a lot of media, but we'd like to have a relationship with the Charlotte Observer. So I fly down to Bradenton, and I show up at IMG, and I remember, I didn't get a ton of time with Cam. Like obviously would have loved to have done 2 days in the life of this bigger than life athlete who's coming to Charlotte. But I did get some time. I remember riding around on the back of a golf cart with him. Going from I think he was going from breakfast to the weight room, and then they let me hang out in the weight room. All of which is to say that that was good, and that felt like a good start. But then once sort of the game started, and covering some of these quarterbacks, you went through this. Listen, even at the college level, maybe especially at the college level, it becomes sort of like covering a rock star.
Yep. That
the access becomes very manipulated or orchestrated, I should say. Cam talks on Wednesday. Cam talks on Sunday after games and Wednesday at the podium. And listen, again, Cam was his own thing. Like I've heard other quarterbacks, you could approach on a Thursday at their locker. I tried a bunch of times, and Cam would sometimes, I'd say, hey, I was really hoping to ask you about this other topic. And sometimes he'd just turn and kind of smile at you and shake his head. And other times he'd say, you know, how long you been covering the team? I only talk Wednesdays. And it's just yeah, I get it. So it became, he was hard to get behind the curtain with. I do remember him in the locker room. This was one of my last exchanges with him, I think. Well, maybe not. And he was, again, he'd walk through the locker room on, let's say, a Monday or a Thursday, but he didn't do the media. And most of the time people wouldn't even talk to him. But I said, hey, Cam. And I said, I had some personal news I wanted to share with you. And he stopped and he turned around, and I said, I'm leaving the Observer. I'm still going to be on the beat. I'm going to the Athletic. And he stuck out his hand. He shook my hand. He said, congratulations. And then he turned around and he kept walking down the other end of So I don't know. That's something that just popped into my head.
Do you chalk that up with Cam to him just being a different dude, or do you chalk it up more to the accumulation of experiences he had with the media over his college career, just sort of souring him on the whole endeavor, or maybe a mix of both?
I think it was a combination of all of that. Then he had a deal here with my former colleague at the Observer, Jordan Rodrigue, a young woman who'd come from the Penn State beat, and Cam made an unfortunate comment about kind of blowing her off and suggesting she didn't know. She asked a question referencing the route tree. Mm-hmm. And he said something like, what are you talking? Why you ask? How would you know to ask me about a route tree? Whatever it was. And that blew up. And I think it was all of it. And I'll tell you another anecdote. I don't know that it means anything, but I think you'll appreciate it. So first year he was there, so not super long after that IMG trip. And he knew me. I had spent some time with him. Well, the Auburn NCAA decision's coming down. And I think it was September, October. And comes down that, pretty much they found them, I don't want to say innocent, but basically they did not find that Cam had done anything wrong, that, Cecil had. But so it drops at 5:00 on a Thursday, and I've got to scramble out to the parking lot and see if I think someone had said, someone had seen him and said, he's actually leaving right now. So I bust out there, and he had GMC sponsorship at the time. So he's getting in this big brand new like Yukon. And I said, "Hey, Cam," getting his attention as he's literally like stepping into the door. And I said, "Hey, the Auburn, the NCAA decision just came out." And I remember him looking at me, and you could tell he didn't know. No one had told him yet. Like,
wow.
he didn't know what the next words out of my mouth were going to be. And I said, "They did not find you culpable," or however I expressed it. And he said, "Well, that's good." And he hopped into the Yukon and he drove off. But he was a different cat to cover. But again, I don't want to make it seem like I've heard that, Ben Roethlisberger, and I don't want to, there are a lot of the quarterbacks are tough to cover. They just don't really want to be bothered, because I think if they do one interview and get off their schedule, then they're going to have to do 5. And Aaron Rodgers, I don't think, makes himself very readily available, except for that great thing he just did on SportsCenter. Who was that with? Rich Eisen or whoever? Kenny Mayne. But anyway, I am rambling, man.
No, it's okay. It's natural for media types to sort of bemoan the typical superstar athlete these days, and to say, "Oh, these guys are so insulated, and how come they don't want to talk to us anymore, and it's not fair." But I wonder, like, how much of this is our fault as an industry, mainly because, back in the, I guess, 90s, when you're the main newspaper guy covering a team, you have a way more profile, I think, than you have now in the eyes of an athlete or a coach, in that, back then they didn't have a social media feed to sort of speak their minds or create their brands or refute something, that somebody might say about them. And then now there's so much out there where an athlete's words can be misconstrued. People can run with stuff as clickbait. People who aren't even on the sort of scene covering that team, somebody on his couch in Kansas City who's paid for clicks, can turn something that Cam Newton says into something way out of context, or Dabo Swinney or whoever. And so I can sort of see why some of these guys are like, what is in it for me? I have nothing to gain by sitting here and talking to you guys on more of a, on a deeper level. Do you agree that the industry itself maybe shares some of the blame, and that stuff gets so blown out of proportion these days, and there's there's so little context, I think, or not as much as there was before, perhaps? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, a lot of sense. I wish I could disagree with you, but you get burned once. I mean, it only takes once. Like, you're right. In the 90s, maybe they didn't have another option. It's like, well, I'm not going to talk to this guy, but I'm going to go talk to the rest of the print and local broadcast media. Now, I'm going to get on my Instagram or I'm going to get on my Twitter, and I'm going to clarify this, and I'm going to do any moving forward, if there's any other instance that is newsworthy, when I sign my contract extension, or when I get player of the week, or whatever, when I just want to get something off my chest, I'm going to do it on my terms, in my words, on my social media, or on the Players Tribune, or on somebody's video blog, which Cam had for a while, his own. So it's very tough. And it's just, again, I keep coming back to just, well, how do you distinguish yourself? I mean, with quality work and honest work, but then with how you interact with these guys. And it doesn't always work. Like, there are some guys, like some of their running backs here who people can figure it out. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're iconic figures in this franchise. But when I got on the beat, I told you they were like 2-14. I think they got tired of answering all the same questions. And, they're just some guys that, like, no matter how much you'd like to say we all get along with everyone, or boy, everyone's going to think I'm a great reporter and they can trust me. It doesn't happen. Like, maybe I had to write a story, or maybe I had to write a column, and then they shut you out. It does happen. And you just hope that your work speaks for itself and your integrity speaks for itself, that those instances and those situations are by far the minority. And because you're right. I mean, it is the last thing I want to do is to have your listeners think that we're like, I know you're not, and that wasn't the intent of your question, but just like bemoaning the fact of new media. Like, that's just the reality. And we roll with the good ones, roll with the punches, and figure out a way to stay relevant. And I do think an honest approach, and one with integrity, goes a long way. Doesn't mean it's all fluffy, as you know, but it's when it's called for, versus just, hot takes.
Yeah. Like it seems like there's a pressure nowadays, not even from bosses, but just in the culture of the social media culture, if that makes any sense, to have a take on everything. Like, whether it's during a game, like, oh God, that's the worst play call I've ever seen, or after a tough loss, it's like, God, what a horrible loss. This one's on the head coach. Like, as opposed to, 20 years ago, a beat writer's job was to just very matter-of-factly cover the team in an understated way. And I think you've done that's your shtick, really, that for your career has been, hey man, I'm a beat guy. It's the opinion guy who's going to come in and deliver some hot take on this or that. How much do you think that sort of eroded sort of the relationship, perhaps in general, between us and the people we cover, and that there's so many people out there who are sort of sitting on their couches just destroying somebody for fumbling, late in the game, or a bad play call, or whatever?
That you're right. You said it. The culture. Like, I can't imagine if I was the tight end that dropped the pass, in the end zone that would have won the game on Monday Night Football. Because, I see, if I make a mistake, if I have done something where I had a bad stat or whatever in one of my stories, you don't even want to, like, turn on Twitter, because it is like an avalanche of people calling you, pointing out just what a, ridiculous, ignorant boob you are. And it's like, I can't imagine. I wouldn't want to turn on any social media. I don't. There have been times I'm like, I'm not going on Twitter today because I screwed that up. Or, I asked a question that needed to be asked and folks didn't think it needed. Like yesterday, asking folks, 2 weeks ago, I asked Darnold if he'd been vaccinated, and he said no. And he said it was a personal decision. Well, my timeline became a huge, for a day and a half, it became a debating spot for the vaccine question. But there were there was another debate going on among people blasting me for asking the question, and then people defending me and pointing out why it was relevant given the protocol. So, yeah, it's absolutely, that has eroded, I think, the players' view. I think we all somewhat get lumped in the same barrel. I do think the more discerning players and those that care to take the time and the energy, and some of them don't. Some of them just like, I don't, it's media. We're all media. But those who notice those of us who've been around a long time, I think that helps, that nobody's fired us from this beat yet. He must have some credibility. I think those people notice, those players notice, I should say, and readers, but some don't. And I think the points you made are absolutely valid, why some of them may not.
When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership, as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archambault. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. On a somber note, recently just two devastating losses to I guess not just the Charlotte Observer, but just the overall Charlotte community. And David Foster, the photographer, passed away. And then Rick Bonnell, the exceptional and decorated NBA writer. Was it within a week of each other, Joe?
8 days.
Oh, my God. You were close to both of those guys, right?
Knew both of them pretty well. Yes, I'd worked with both of them. David was mostly a sports photographer and an excellent one. He would come to Spartanburg with me for camp every summer. There were two guys, David Foster and Jeff Seiner, who were the main sports photographers during my years at the Observer. Exceptional. That was a great word you used, both of them. And you're kind of just still numb and dealing with your feelings from David's death and passing at 52, and which is about what I am. And then Rick, a week later, 8 days later, unexpectedly and passes away at 63, and it's just a huge blow for those of us who knew those guys or worked with them. I was impressed. There was a big outpouring of support for both of those guys. Now, Rick was a little more forward facing just by the nature of his job. And I mean, Ernie Johnson on Inside the NBA did like a 45-second tribute to Rick, during the playoff coverage. And besides all the Michael Jordan quotes and all that, which were very cool and well deserved, I was struck, Larry, I went to Rick's visitation about a week and a half ago here in Charlotte, and there's a big line and a lot of folks you would know from sports media. And, obviously very somber as we talked with Rick's family. So as I'm leaving, I'd kind of gotten there toward the end of the 2-hour window, and I'm making my way out of the back of this funeral home. And I noticed there's a gentleman there wearing a Hornets jersey, with a girlfriend or wife who was wearing like a Hornets colored purple and teal dress. And I am sure I did not go and ask them, but I think they were just fans that saw on Twitter the details of when this visitation was going to be. And they came out, and I thought that was probably the coolest thing I saw or read or saw or heard during all of that unfortunate time, that Rick touched so many people, and the kind of coverage he did and the legacy he left prompted just a Hornets fan to come in. Maybe there were more than one. He was just the only one wearing a jersey where it was obvious. I was like, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, and he was, I guess, once Clemson got to playoff level in football over the last, I guess, 6 years ago, he would come around here pretty regularly covering them. And so I got to know him, and just such a sweet person. Was really supportive of me. I think he read my manuscript maybe when I was doing a book on the 15 season, and just super supportive. But reading all the tributes and sort of insight into how he did his job, it really reinforced just how hard it is to be really good at that job, because you have to do so many different things right. And I think I actually wrote this. I just pulled it up because it was actually a topic on our message board when he passed, and so I sort of weighed in. And I'm not reading this to brag about what I wrote as much, just to sort of crystallize what I'm talking about. But I say covering a beat well requires so many qualities that can be conflicting: confidence and curiosity, being a determined truth teller while also being fair and human, being an expert on what you cover while still thirsting to learn more, doing something that's solitary and introverted while also being engaging and networking with sources and readers. And then on top of all that, having exceptional work ethic and the ability to write well just about every day, and often under brutal deadline pressure, not to mention the pressures of continuing to remain employed in a dying industry. Rick was all those things and more. And it just, man, that's a lot of things you have to be good at that are really in conflict with each other. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, you said that a lot more eloquently than I could, but I agree with you. And I just was struck by Rick. Like, I remember at a writing conference once, someone saying that, and this was great advice. I was in a workshop, and someone said, have someone in, like, the newsroom's full of talented people. Like, find someone not on your beat that you can get feedback from, or you can just go over and say, I'm stuck on this story. What would you recommend? And Rick kind of became that guy for me at the Observer. We did not go in the newsroom much in Charlotte. I mean, we were all so busy that the sports department, anyway, I should say, we'd go in and do our expenses mostly. Yeah. But I would get text from Rick, and he would say, he wasn't trying to tell me how to do my job, but he would say, I really liked this angle you took with this Steve Smith story. Have you thought about, maybe looking at this different angle the next time you write about him? And I was so grateful for that. He's Rick, above all else, or including all those other traits, bright guy. And I mean, would have, I'm sure, crushed in any profession. I'm glad he chose this one. But he was that guy for me. And if I were stuck on, and his Hornets coverage was so authoritative that it wasn't just like, here's who won or lost. I mean, far from it. It was, here's why. And it was not just surface stuff. And I'm not even a huge NBA fan, but I was reading his coverage just in the hopes that it might make me just a little bit better of a reporter, or see things in a different light.
Yeah, I think what people who aren't in this industry don't understand is when you read that Michael Jordan returned his texts and calls, you don't get to that sort of exalted level by kissing the ass of Michael Jordan. You do it by being fair, friendly, by doing your job in a way that that elevates you. I think some people might not understand that the relationships, when you say building relationships with sources, it doesn't mean becoming their best buds. It means walking kind of a delicate line, because there are times when you have to call it like you see it, and to retain the respect and trust of high profile people you're covering through all that is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, and Rick did it very well and for a long time. And, the fact that he was there for the Hornets' first days and first game right up through this past season when they were, trying to have the play-in game. A pretty remarkable career. And I'll just say this too, that a lot of a measure of a man is kind of the legacy they leave behind, man or woman. It doesn't matter. So Rick's son, Jack Bonnell, I knew him when he was playing football for Myers Park High School, and he wasn't a big football guy. So he goes off to, I think he went to App, and he after he graduated from Appalachian, he was working in their sports marketing department, like Learfield ISP kind of stuff, and he's now doing the same thing at Chapel Hill. But at the time, my oldest daughter, was visiting colleges, and we were going to go to we were on our way to App, and I text Rick. And I said, "Hey, we're heading up to App. Any places, we should go have lunch?" And he said, "Well, no. What you need to do is get in touch with Jack, my son." And we did. And I mean, Larry, he said, "What time?" And I don't know Jack that well. He said, and he didn't know my daughter at all. He said, "What time's your tour going to be done?" And it looks like 3:00. 3:00. He shows up in this parking lot near their football stadium. He has hot out of the oven chocolate chip and macadamia nut cookies from this famous bakery in Boone. I forget the name of it, but it's wonderful. He hands this box to my daughter. I think we eat one, pack the rest then he proceeds to give us a behind the scenes tour of the football stadium and the weight room and the athletic hall of fame. And I mean, and I told Jack this at the visitation. I said, "Your dad could not have been more proud of you, and absolutely for good reason." And as a tribute to Rick Bonnell, about to realize the kind of son that he's left behind, and daughter. I met his daughter at the visitation too, and she was wonderful. I just didn't know her as well.
Last topic. I have to learn more about what it was like to have relationships with Lou Holtz and Spurrier. I mean, did you have good relationships with them? Was it more up and down? I mean, that can be a tough beat, particularly, given how fanatical the fans are down there. We saw what happened with Spurrier and Ron Morris, I guess. I think that was after you left, right?
It was sort of brewing, and I caught a lot of it, but it sort of boiled over after I left.
Well, you had I guess it was you had some really good reporting and investigating of the I guess the Winfrey stuff. I forgot when that was, and was that when Spurrier's? I think I remember. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard this third hand, but that was when he started calling you Negative Joe or whatever. And is that what you're referring to? Things had started to sour a little bit.
Yeah, he did. That he would say that. I mean, it wasn't like he said that every press conference, but he said it more than once. And I think it was some of that coverage and just, the fact that if I was pointing out, just like we have to in a loss, that they, however they managed to bungle away a game at LSU or whatever it was. But that was tough. But and fans and readers saw and heard that during the press conferences. But Steve always returned my calls. he always would text me back to this day. And so it's not like, I think he appreciated at some level, not saying all the time, but I think he understood I had a job to do. And, sometimes it wasn't great stuff that, as you said, some of that NCAA stuff that we reported. But, it was tough to get to know Lou. He did not make himself available, and he wasn't much on cell phones and that kind of stuff. I did get to know Skip Holtz pretty well. I don't know why I'm telling you this, apropos to nothing, but I had a long time ago had played football at William & Mary, and Lou had coached at William & Mary very early on in his career. And in trying to break the ice one day, this wasn't in like a huge press conference setting. I think there was like, I think there were like a few of us standing around his office or something. And it was like my first week or two on the beat. So I thought I'd be funny and tell Lou, I said, I said, I'm the new guy. I said, Joe Person. I said, I actually played football at William & Mary. And I said, that was back when we actually threw to the tight ends, because Lou was known for not using the tight. Well, Lou Holtz at 70 or whatever he was at the time, still pretty quick, and immediately was like, yeah, William & Mary, that's a Division I AA program, right, Joe? I said, yes, it is, Lou. And I don't think I ever tried to joke with him, at least publicly, again.
What do you make of the dysfunction down there? I mean, there's some things that just seem to be consistent throughout history. I mean, we have their trustees popping off regularly in the papers, and it looks like Frank Martin, their Final Four coach, they're trying to force him out. That gets into the papers somehow. Then they have to keep him because they can't afford it because they're buying out Will Muschamp. And just, there's so much drama down there. And then, of course, the stuff with the president, of course. I mean, I know people up here, particularly trustee types, are looking down there and going, wow, like just, holy smokes. Just, it seems so serene up here compared to down there when there are so many sort of cooks in the kitchen, I guess. Was that the case when you were down there as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know what it is with it, and I don't know if it's fair for me after having been gone so long. I can't obviously talk about the culture, existing culture. I guess when I was there, it did seem like they had a couple of board members that and maybe this is true of every place. I didn't really know it to be as true when I had covered Georgia Tech, but just maybe giving a couple, few board members too much of a voice and too much clout, I guess. I don't know if that was part of it. But it did. I'll tell you what, I would go to those board meetings, and I know you go to them also. Wasn't any not pat myself on the back, but some of them, they were pretty entertaining. I remember Darla Moore, who, of course, is given all kinds of money, and she's had her own thing back. I remember her being very, and not hiding her feelings, being very bored anytime athletic business came up. So she was not one of the ones like trying to meddle in the athletic stuff. I mean, she would kind of roll her eyes and she wasn't like reading her phone but seemingly making it clear that sort of stuff did not interest her. So it wasn't on Darla, but it did seem like there were folks that maybe, I don't know what it was.
I had Spurrier on the podcast a couple of years ago.
Did you really? That must have been a hoot.
It was. It was. We were talking, just talk about the rivalry and stuff, and about Dabo, his relationship with Dabo, and I don't think he knows what a podcast is, or at least he didn't at that point. And
he didn't know what he was agreeing to.
No, I think he thought I was just a newspaper guy or something, and so. we were talking about the old, the Dabo rant back in 2011 against South Carolina. It was provoked by a tweet that the University of South Carolina football sports information Twitter feed attributed to Spurrier, but basically said it was after they beat Clemson, I guess for the third time in a row, maybe. And Todd Ellis said, "Well, Coach, we ain't Alabama and we ain't LSU, but thank God we're not Clemson." And so the football, the official Twitter feed, tweeted that and attributed it to Spurrier mistakenly. And so that's what provoked the big blow up from Dabo.
Right.
Who thought it was Spurrier who said it. Anyway, so during the podcast interview with Spurrier a couple of years ago, he goes, "Well, here's what happened." He said, "We had some, well, can you write dumbass in your story?" And I said, "Coach, you can say whatever you want to say." He goes, "Well, anyway, some dumbass in sports information." Put that out there. Oh, what a treasure.
Oh, my God. How did he ever? Steve read everything.
Did he?
So when you would get these cell phone or these calls from him, not even text. You'd get calls from him at like 7 a.m. And he'd be kind of parsing words. I didn't really say that now, Joe. I said, well, he's like, yeah, I can see why you thought that, but that really, I'm wondering, did you ever get any reaction from your pod with him?
Not from him, no, not from him.
Okay. I bet people love that.
It was a great story from Paul Strelo from back when he first took over in Columbia, when Spurrier first took over. Spurrier came up to do like a normal rubber chicken, booster club thing in Spartanburg.
Right.
Like right after he takes over, I guess, or maybe the following spring or whatever. And so Paul has no relationship with him yet. And so Paul writes, he just noted in the story, because Spurrier left right away. He didn't stick around kissing babies and things like that.
Right,
and Paul just noted, it was one paragraph, maybe halfway through the story, it just noted that, while Lou Holtz, while his predecessor, was prone to hanging around and kissing babies and all that, Spurrier was whisked away, 4 minutes after he got done speaking, something like that. So the next day, Paul is bathing one of his children in the bathtub, and his phone rings, and it's an unknown number. So he doesn't answer it. Well, so then he checks the voicemail, and as Paul tells it, it's Steve Spurrier saying, "Hey, Paul, this is Steve. I didn't really like something you wrote. How about give me a call when you get a chance?" And so, anyway, Paul resumes bathing his child. Phone rings again 5 minutes later. "Hey, Paul, it's Steve again. I ain't got no problem with you. I just don't want you making me look like a dumbass. Just give me a call."
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Epic stories, man.
I forgot about those 7:30 a.m. calls.
So how many of those would you get a week?
They weren't weekly, but
okay.
You'd get a few in a season. I'll be honest. I do. Most of them were how you're describing. I don't think I'm dreaming this up. Maybe I am. I was going to say maybe call you from time to time, and he did. There would be times. It's usually if you were talking about him and some super play calling, you would get calls where he would say that he liked that story. Most of them were the other direction, but he was a hoot to cover up. Again, I'm just sort of rambling.
No, go ahead.
He, so it had to be his second year there, I think. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think they went. The first bowl trip they made with him was to Shreveport. I think I'm getting this right. Uh-huh. And then the second year they go to Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. So back to back, lower rung bowls. But bowl games. So we're out at Rhodes College in Memphis, which is a little, very pretty Division II school tucked at a very nice part of Memphis. And it's not like 2 feet of snow, but it's snowing in December in Memphis. And Spurrier comes off the practice field, and there are like 4 or 5 of us waiting there, and you could see he was miserable cold. Like he had a windbreaker on, and he comes up and he's like, "Yeah, boys, hey, you media boys, we got to get the message out. These Gamecocks, we got to start playing in those Florida Bowl games." And to his credit, he did. He got him in some Florida Bowls, but he was not loving that December cold snap in Memphis.
I had somebody tell me, who swore to me, that every post game, as he's sitting there looking at the stats, about to hold court with the media boys, as he calls them, he would have a can of Sprite. And he always looked like he was enjoying it more than a normal person would enjoy a Sprite. Somebody swore to me, who used to cover them, I won't name names, but that Jamie Speronis, his sidekick, his right-hand person, it was Jamie's job to go get a Sprite, empty it out, and put some banquet, his beloved Coors Banquet beer in there.
I don't doubt it. He's a character. He was fun to cover. Pat Dooley told me, the longtime Gainesville Sun columnist, he said, "You just be prepared. Like, don't go out to practice every day like thinking you've got your story written, because you think you're writing about the quarterbacks, and then Steve's going to take a shot at Philip Fulmer." And he did, and it was wonderful, and it was much more interesting than the story that I had planned that day.
I guess you were there after they lost to Georgia. I forgot what year that was, at home. I think Matt Stafford was the quarterback, and I think Blake Mitchell might have fumbled at the goal line like twice or something. And Spurrier called him a dumbass in the press conference.
I think that's right. I think this is right too. And this guy, again, small world of journalism. This guy came through the Panthers as like the third-team quarterback. Joe Webb was a very good athletic UAB quarterback, whatever year this would have been, 05, 06, 05, I think, whatever. I'm bad with dates, but pretty sure it was Spurrier's first game at Williams-Brice Stadium, and they hold on. The Gamecocks hold on to barely to beat UAB, and Spurrier saying something like, "Yeah, we were very good Gamecocks tonight. I mean, that Joe Webb, he was the best player on the field. He looked like some sorry bunch of Gamecocks trying to tackle Joe Webb."
What was your reaction from afar when you saw him sort of lose his mind that time? I guess it was 2011, telling the media he's going to go into another room if Ron Morris is in the room. He's not going to hold his press conference when Ron Morris is in the room, and just sort of flipped out.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like that. No one in media would like that, obviously, but having known Ron very well and really respecting Ron, I hated that. It felt like a bully pulpit, which it was, and I remember texting Ron, but I didn't dive too deeply into it, but it reminded me of the times when he would, this was obviously, times 10, but when, the negative Joe stuff, and, some of that maybe I deserve, but there are also other ways to handle stuff, and like the phone calls, like that was kind of a cool thing he did, or a unique thing, but at least it was, you guys, you could kind of hash it out with them, where you couldn't really, you weren't really getting a chance to respond in those press conference settings.
Joe Person, I have held you way too long, man, but really appreciate your time, appreciate your what you've done in the industry. Just one of the great ones for sure. And hey, you're going to bring your daughter to Clemson for a tour. I'd love to hang out. I don't know if I'm going to have cookies or macadamia nuts for you, but it'll maybe just be me, and maybe that won't be enough, but I would love to see you in person.
I'd love that, man. And I enjoyed cutting it up with you here today, man. It's been too long, and since we've seen each other, and I appreciate you. Much respect, and thanks for having me on, buddy.
Absolutely, Joe. All right, that was great fun with Joe, man, full of institutional knowledge from all of his days, full of stories as well. And man, we're both old. That's just the reality of the situation. Anyway, thanks to Joe. Thanks to our very loyal 6 sponsors for supporting the podcast. And most of all, thanks to all of you for hitting play every week. Everybody have a great and safe weekend. Cheers.